want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write to your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first, you've got to get mad.
Welcome back to Hacks on Hacks, the media criticism podcast preferred by dozens of savvy listeners. I'm Sonny Bunch, executive editor of the Washington Free Beacon and co-host of the Sub Beacon podcast. Joining me on my left, ironically, is Free Beacon senior writer Liz Harrington. Liz, how are you?
I'm great, Sonny. How are you?
I'm fantastic. And joining me on my right, again, ironically, is Free Beacon staff writer and noted squish, Alex Griswold. Alex, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
First up, Media Matters versus Tucker Carlson. The far-left anti-Fox Oppo firm recently dug up some decade-old clips of Tucker Carlson on Shock Jock Bubba the Love Sponge's satellite radio show. Let's listen to some of the damning clips.
Iraq is a crappy place filled with a bunch of, semi-literate, primitive monkeys. But I just have zero sympathy for them or their culture, a culture where people just don't use toilet paper or forks.
And the way they treat women, I agree with you. Their culture is, but you're in their homeland, and you're over there as an American who they hate, and they want nothing more than the Americans off of their soil. So they're not going to play games.
They can just shut the fuck up and obey, is my view.
How could you salvage Iraq at this point?
I don't, it's beyond our control. I mean, if somehow the Iraqis decided to behave like human beings or something. Well, actually, he's not in prison for that. Warren Jeffs didn't marry underage girls.
No, he's in prison for facilitation of child rape.
Whatever the hell that means.
That means
he's in prison. He's in prison because he's weird and unpopular, and he has a different lifestyle that other people find creepy.
No, he's an accessory to the rape of children. That is a felony, and a serious one at that.
What do you mean an accessory? He's got some weird religious cult where he thinks it's okay to, marry underage girls. But he didn't do it. Why wouldn't the guy who actually did it, who had sex with an underage girl, he should be the one who's doing life? The rapist in this case has made a lifelong commitment to live and take care of the person. So it is a little different. I mean, let's just be honest about it. He's not accused of touching anybody. He is accused of facilitating a marriage between a 16-year-old girl and a 27-year-old man. That's the accusation. That's what they're calling felony rape.
But in our state,
that's bullshit. I'm sorry. Now, this guy may be a total maybe a child rapist. I'm just telling you that arranging a marriage between a 16-year-old and a 27-year-old is not the same as pulling a stranger off the street and raping her. That's bullshit.
Tucker has refused to apologize, and his website, The Daily Caller, has gone on the offensive, highlighting blog posts by Media Matters president Angelo Carusone? I don't know how to pronounce his name,
right.
In which he repeatedly slammed, quote, trannies, unquote, said that, quote, Japs, unquote, needed to lighten up because a basketball coach made girls on the team run around nude, and said that he loved his boyfriend despite his, quote, jewelry, unquote. There are many different angles to consider here, okay? Does the venue in which this is offensive speech occurs matter? Does it matter that it's on like a Shock Jocks talk show versus on his TV show? Should Tucker apologize even absent any official punishment by Fox? But the question that really jumps out at me, Liz, is this. Should MSNBC fire him for the offensive things he said while he was working for the liberal network?
I'm so glad you asked me, because my question also was maybe Joy Reid's hackers can go back in time and get Tucker fired from MSNBC. And it's a win-win, right?
I mean, it's weird how it only comes up now that Tucker is one of the foremost defenders of Donald Trump on television.
Right. I hate this style, but I didn't realize that Daily Caller was doing unto them, which is great. That's what the response should be, because it's so absurd. If the statements he made on a shock jock, like the entire point is to be offensive. If it wasn't so terrible back then when he was a media personality, had a show on MSNBC or a contributor, then what are we talking about here? It's such a waste. Obviously the agenda is just to make him lose advertisers, get him off the air, because they're not happy. They're not satisfied having one worldview dominate every other single network. They go after Fox, and it's just sad that the rest of CNN and MSNBC fall for this. They're totally in lockstep with the far left Media Matters propaganda.
Alex, let's stipulate from the Cuck POV
yes.
that what Tucker has said is offensive.
Yes.
And is not.
And I would
is
agree
not-
with that, yeah.
Is not great. These are not opinions that people normally will promulgate and take credit for. Leaving that aside, what is the proper response by Fox and the rest of the media here? What should be done about Tucker?
It's an interesting question. Liz mentioned Joy Reid, and my stance on that was essentially Joy Reid said some bad things a decade ago. What is bad is not that she said them a decade ago, but how she reacts today, which was to go on about the hackers, to refuse to apologize. And Tucker's response. Well, I should know it off the back. I used to work for Tucker, so I know I'm a hack, but unfortunately, I will give some disclosure there. So I do consider him, I'll say, a friend. He gave me probably my first job in media. So
he's who we blame.
He's
for Alex Griswold.
So I would say that Tucker should probably be going about this a better way, in my opinion. If it is the case that it's okay because it's on a jock, that it's not his views, et cetera, why not just say something to that effect? And if they continue to double
down,
down,
I said some naughty things on radio, like ooh.
Yeah, but he's saying there's no appearance of contrition, obviously.
Yeah, because why should you give them an inch? It's so absurd to give the standards of 2019, where you cannot say anything, apparently, right, to a shock jock show. And look, the holier than thou, Brian Stelters and Eric Wemple, Tucker called all women the C word. Well, first of all, he didn't call all women the C word. He called one woman the C word. And act like they've never used the C word. Like, give me a break. Is anyone actually offended by this?
I want to interject here because this is one of my long-running things, is that I think the American reaction to the C word is very unhealthy. We should be much more like the British, where it is just kind of another vulgarity. It's not like everyday speech or anything, but it is not the sort of, it's not some
you don't have to watch Tucker then.
word.
If you're so offended by these things he said in 2006, you're probably not watching Tucker anyway.
I guess I wonder, what is the limiting principle here?
Well, so this is another question I had.
Yeah.
A writer named Connor Friedersdorf had an interesting story at The Atlantic where he says, of course, this is terrible. This is all very bad. Tucker shouldn't have said these things. He should apologize, etc. But do we now have to kind of work toward a new ethic of limiting what sort of outrage we monger and generate based on decades-old stuff, right? I think that the phrase he used was outrage archaeology. Do we need to have this? Do we need to have a standard where we say, look, somebody says something offensive many years ago, we just say, okay, well, that's part of their past. It didn't stop them from getting this current job. We shouldn't use it as a pretext for firing them, because this is simply a pretext. People want him fired because of the things he said on Fox.
Yeah.
And they want him fired because he supports Donald Trump. Now, look, there's a whole different argument there to be made about that. His segment on the gypsies, I think, for instance, was far more offensive than anything he has said here, and he did that on Fox. But like leaving that, like this is all a pretext to get him off the air, to get him silenced.
Yes.
And this is why, Alex, I have to disagree. I don't think it's worth apologizing for.
No.
I don't think it's worth giving. You don't give an inch, because if you give an inch, they take a mile.
I guess the problem is the outrage archaeology thing. I think it does serve a somewhat limited purpose as it relates to current views. The question is, does Tucker believe what he said then? And some of the things he said back then were legitimately terrible.
Sure. Totally. We just heard them.
Yes,
So.
we just heard them. We don't have to go over them again. But the problem is that the people who are bringing this up think it relates to his current views. They call him a white supremacist constantly. They call him a white nationalist constantly. So when you have this, and when you have him not appearing contrite for saying them at all, I think it's not a good look. I think that probably exacerbates the problem more than it would be to just say, yeah, you got me, but...
No, but they won't stop till he's off the air. And they won't
That's
stop
the thing.
until
I guess
Kevin
so.
Williamson's fired, which they got him fired
Right.
from The Atlantic. It's the same thing. And it's so unhealthy because they want to stifle debate. That's the goal here.
I guess so, but I mean, why did I go digging through Joy Reid's archives? I mean, like, by the same principle, she should have just, doubled down as well.
But again, a lot of people on Fox weren't calling for her to be fired either. They were just pointing,
Yeah, that was more jovial.
It's also just highlighting the double standard here, and this is the same thing with Angelo. I'm not going to pronounce his last name again, from Media Matters. The point isn't that Media Matters needs to fire this person who said all of these offensive things about
point is, let's
the
apply
transgender
their
community.
standards to them.
If you believe that offensive things said 15 years ago are relevant to today's marketplace of ideas, then he should be out. Right? Just as much as Tucker deserves to be out.
Exactly.
Yeah. And one distinction, quick, is Joy Reid said there was an FBI investigation too. Like her response was totally different than Tucker's.
Yeah. Google, you don't know there isn't. It's ongoing. There's an ongoing.
They don't
investigation.
confirm or deny investigations.
Mm-hmm. All right. Next up, Sandman versus CNN. The lawyers for Nick Sandman, who is probably fated to be known forever as the kid who smiled while wearing a MAGA hat, have launched another lawsuit against a major media outlet, suing CNN for $275 million. According to the lawyers, quote, without any reasonable investigation, CNN took something straight off Twitter that had been, in essence, manipulated so that it told one story, and they reported it as the truth, end quote. While this seems like a fair and accurate charge, Alex, what are our national news outlets going to do if they can no longer grab random Twitter outrages to feed the content beast? Won't someone please think of the networks?
I think they would probably have to do things like reporting, that sort of stuff. I know it's a crazy idea, but I think we basically went over my views on this when he sued the Washington Post, which is I don't know that the courts are the best place to sort of litigate this because there's a chance of failure. And 10 years down the road when we talk about this, if he sues all these companies and he loses, which is a possibility, that's just going to be an excuse for the media to say, well, we treated him fine. This was adjudicated. We didn't do anything wrong. This is something that I think would be better to be handled in the court of public opinion. Mm-hmm. Because, again...
The court of public opinion can't give you $275 million. There's a problem there.
Yeah. Well, did you see after we discussed the Washington Post article on the podcast, there was a great piece in Law and Crime that pointed out that the lawyers made an unforced error that'll probably end up costing them about $200 million in that case, which is in Kentucky, you can file punitive damages if you ask for a correction and don't get it in a timely manner. The law defines timely as 10 days, and then they filed their lawsuit after 5 days. So that makes me a bit skeptical about like the attorneys handling the case. Like, are they just going to botch this? And for that matter, I don't even know what the purpose of all this is. Do they actually want the money, or is it more about, as we saw with the Washington Post, getting a correction?
Well, they probably want a settlement,
I think
and
that's
some
probably
sort of
the Washington Post lawsuit is ongoing. I believe that has not been dismissed or settled.
Even if this is unlikely to happen, but even if anyone in the media starts to think twice about just grabbing these viral fake stories and running with it, then it would be worth it. But the problem here too is CNN is still doing it. Okay, you search MAGA hat on their website. Here are the headlines you get: why Trump's MAGA hats have become a potent symbol of racism. Picture of Nick Sandman. Also,
when was that? When did that?
That was right after the controversy. These are two opinion pieces, I should note.
Yeah.
But the picture they use is of smirking
MAGA kid.
Yes. And also the other headline, America mocks and dehumanizes natives at every turn. I mean, they're still doing it, okay, right? You don't have to take down opinion, but the fact that they're using him as a face for every, terrible white supremacist racist symbol, still to this day, that is speaking to the problem. They've tried to ruin this guy's reputation, his life. Mm-hmm. Why didn't take down the picture? Because the picture itself we know is inaccurate.
Yeah. This again, as Alex said, we have covered this before with the Washington Post, and I do still get a little bit nervous anytime a major media outlet is subjected to a lawsuit. But I have a hard time seeing how you concoct a reasonable defense for the way
egregious.
for the way this kid was treated. I mean, I don't see it. He's private citizen. Wasn't in the wrong. They ran with this totally manipulated video. Led to him getting, death threats and being doxxed on the internet. Mm-hmm. His school was shut down. There has to be some sort of punishment. I don't think it needs to be $250 million or $275 million or something like that, but something beyond a slap on the wrist.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Finally, we come to my favorite matchup of the week, Jay Leno versus Comedy Today. Talking to the hosts of the Today Show, Leno lamented the fact that Comedy Today is too one-sided and that, quote, everyone has to know your politics. Let's listen to Leno now.
Do you miss being on the show, or is it such a different time that it would be hard to do?
No, it's different. I don't miss it. everything now is, if people don't like your politics, everyone has to know your politics. When I kind of used Johnny's model, people couldn't figure out, well, you and your Republican friends, well, Mr. Leno, you and your Democratic buddies, and I would get hate mail from both sides equally. And I went, well, that's fabulous. That's exactly what I want. Yes. But when people see you as one-sided, it just makes it tough. And plus, I did it when, Clinton was horny and Bush was dumb, and it was just a little easier.
You're a mess.
Now it's all very serious. Everything is just so. I just like to see a bit of civility come back to it. If people say, "Oh, it must be easy to do jokes with Trump." No, it's actually harder because the punchline of the joke used to be, "That's like the president with a porn star." Well, now the president is with a porn star. Where do you go with that? How do you get more outrageous than that? Yeah, exactly.
Do you think the pendulum will swing back the other direction?
Of course, I think it will. Yeah. I think it'll swing back the other way.
Like, I got to be honest with you, I don't know what he's talking about here. I mean, sure, Stephen Colbert is hosting a late night show while Samantha Bee hosts a late night show and John Oliver hosts a late night show. And granted, Jimmy Kimmel is doing stand-up advertorials for Obamacare while Jimmy Fallon is getting dragged for daring to do something apolitical. And yes, Netflix keeps offering up stinkers like that Michelle Wolf series and Patriot Act with Hassan Minhaj. And sure, The Daily Show is still on the air and SNL has no idea how to make AOC look funny or do anything else. But Liz, isn't the problem here that Leno is just an out-of-touch old white guy?
Exactly. Old white guy.
Old white guy. Doesn't know
what
he's doing.
He's probably a Republican. This is exactly what we were saying the other week. And you have to be a left-wing activist now to be a comedian. And it's just, the sad thing is it's not funny. It's not funny if you think, how can you be laughing if the world's going to end in 12 years and we're all going to die because of climate change? How can you laugh if you think Trump is destroying every single, institution of democracy? It's just, it ruins comedy. He's exactly right. And does anyone watch these shows anymore? I mean,
yeah, the ratings have just gone down and down and down. Alex, are you old enough to remember Jay Leno being a late night host? I'm not sure, where your memory kicks in.
No, I was an adult when that whole battle between him and Conan was a thing. Those were headlines, man.
But were you born when the original Leno versus Letterman battle happened in the early 1990s?
I was alive, but I believe I was in my cradle.
Okay. No, it is. I mean, it's interesting to hear Leno talk about this because I will be honest, when I'm listening to him talk, I do think, wow, that's kind of out of touch. And that actually makes me sad because it's like, well,
it's all
everything
political
is
now.
Everything is political. But this also speaks to another point about the late night wars, which is that very few people relative to the Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, David Letterman days watch these shows anymore. They're not the ratings behemoths they once were because there is so much fragmentation. And I do think that there is, but the odd thing about the fragmentation is that it is all fragmented in one way. You have like 10 different shows micro-targeted at, the same like 10 million people who are up after 11 p.m. and want left-wing comedy, and that's it. If only there were some funny conservatives.
But there aren't.
But there aren't.
That's not true.
Liz.
I mean, liberals aren't funny. Give me a break. They have no sense of humor.
I'm sure some liberals are funny.
That's why they've never succeeded on talk radio, though, because they're scolds.
Well, they've got those great podcasts.
Yeah. They're no Bubba the Love Sponge.
They're no Bubba the Love Sponge.
Podcasts are so serious.
Podcasts are very serious. This is
Leno's point. Everything's so serious now, and it's there's plenty funny conservatives. Give me a break.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Fine. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to offend you by saying that there are no funny conservatives. I'm
offended.
You are offended. I'm
outraged.
I'm just gonna stop talking now. Be silenced. Now we turn to producer and bon vivant Andrew Kugel. Andrew, what do you have for us this week?
I have Minnesota Congresswoman Ilhan Omar launched an attack on our First Amendment.
Oh no!
Attacking our democracy. After Politico published an article where she was quoted of bashing former President Barack Obama. In the article, Politico wrote, as she saw it, the party committed to progressive values had become complicit in perpetuating the status quo. Omar says the hope and change offered by Barack Obama was a mirage, recalling the caging of kids at the U.S.-Mexico border and the droning of countries around the world on Obama's watch. She argues that the Democratic president operated with the same fundamentally broken framework as Donald Trump. So Omar was offended at this, and she tweeted out, Exhibit A of how reporters distort words. I'm an Obama fan. I was saying how Trump is different from Obama and why we should focus on policy, not politics. This is why I always tape my interviews. And in the tweet, she included a clip of it. We can play it.
Yes, it's a little bit long. Just listen to the whole thing.
For many of us, we think of ourselves as Democrats, but many of the ways that our Democratic leaders have conducted themselves within the system is not one that we are all proud of. Mm-hmm. You know, I will talk about the family separation or caging of kids, and people will point out that this was Trump. I mean, this was Obama. And, you know, I'll say something about the droning of countries around the world, and people will say that was Obama. And all of that is very true. Mm-hmm. What is happening now is very different, because a lot of it is happening with secrecy. It's happening with the feel-good, polished way of talking about it. And when we talk about waking people up from complacency, is to say that we can be only upset with Trump because he's not a politician who sells us his policies in the most perfect way. His policies are bad, but many of the people who came before him also had really bad policies. They just were more polished than he was. And that's not what we should be looking for anymore. We don't want anybody to get away with murder because they are polished. Mm-hmm. We want to recognize the actual policies that are behind the pretty face and the smile, so that we can understand the kind of negative impact or positive impact they will have on us for generations to come.
Yeah, so I think the reporter was right. Tim Alberta from Politico responded saying, like, your evidence that you provided proves that I'm right, and just basically
right, that he quoted her exactly.
Yeah. And then, I mean, it is kind of like very, I consider it like Trumpian move, where there's like video evidence and you still deny it. Like all these progressives, AOC, Omar, they adopted his media policies, but we don't hear the outrage and the cry of attacking reporters and how our democracy is threatened.
Yes. It's very sad, this threat against the First Amendment that we are seeing from the freshman House representatives. I'm deeply dismayed. Yes. Deeply dismayed. All right, what else you got?
I got a horrifying video clip from CNN.
This really is the worst.
Yeah.
I almost feel bad that we're subjecting people to this.
I have to suffer through it. You all have to. Okay. Misery loves company. So it's between Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo, and they're singing the theme song from All in the Family. Let's play it.
On that. Yeah. But, you know, before these newfangled industries, before this multiculturalism, before this everything is okay and everyone's equal, before let's make ourselves great again. I say to people all the time, when were we ever greater than we are today?
Boy,
more free, more inclusive. Songs that made the hit parade. Guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days.
This is my favorite part.
I would have to be Archie. You be Edith. Guys were guys, men were men.
Men were men. Oh my gosh.
Mister, we could use a man like Herbert Hoover again. That's what he's tapping into.
State. Everybody pulled their sleigh.
Gee, our old LaSalle ran great.
That's exactly what this is. Those were the days.
That's what we're going back to.
Norman Lear, brilliant.
Brilliant show, but what was it supposed to do? It was a parody. It was a parody of the perversity of ignorance in the form of Archie Bunker.
You know what I'm hearing right now? Rap.
I know. That's what I'm hearing too.
Listen, I got Frank. Did you read Frank Bruni's column today?
I did.
He's right.
That's the worst.
Can I retract my comment about liberals being funny?
Yeah, so, come on.
I don't even understand what was the context of this? Why were they doing this? This is literally worse than dead air.
This is why only 600,000 people are watching, by the way.
1 minute of dead air would have been better than this.
Yeah, they usually have this like 5-minute conversation between the two when they hand off the show, and so they were talking during this conversation about Trump's boomer tweets about the airplanes and how we need people rather than machines flying the planes. and they were
He makes a
comparing
good
him.
point.
They were comparing him to Archie Bunker, the character in All in the Family, of like him being the ignorant, and that it was a parody of being ignorant in that time, and saying Trump was just like that. And
so they start singing.
Yeah, I don't. It was horrifying.
The worst. Okay, thank you, Andrew, for subjecting us to that. We're gonna have to have a talk after the show. I don't know if this is gonna work out. Speaking of things that are the worst, it's now time for my favorite part of the show, the worsts.
The worst.
Alex, could you walk us through the worst tweet of the week?
The worst tweet of the week goes once again to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez.
It's been 2 weeks since we mentioned
Why
her.
are
We
you
had to
so
get her. We had to get her in.
I know,
We're
I
so
am
obsessed
with her. I kind of am, but so the background to the tweet is a bit wonky. So I'll just say AOC was hit by an FEC complaint due to some kind of shady dealings with a PAC during her campaign, and the guy that filed it is named Luke. Or sorry, the guy who first brought it to people's attention is named Luke Thompson. So here's the Ocasio-Cortez tweet. Whoa. The creepy org filing bogus ethics complaints against me just got actually hit with one of the biggest fines in FEC history. They took a $1.3 million donation from Chinese corporations, breaking federal law barring foreign intervention in elections! Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point.
3.
So that would be a good point, but no. It is wrong in 3 different ways, which is a bit fascinating that a person can actually do that. Yeah. First of all, the organization that filed the FEC complaint is called the National Legal Policy Center. The organization that she was talking about who got the FEC fine was Right to Rise, a pro-Jeb super PAC. So right off the bat, completely wrong. Secondly, the guy I talked about, Luke Thompson, he does not work for Right to Rise. He used to. He does no longer. And third, he had nothing to do with the fine. So it's just completely wrong. But I'm sorry, she did offer a correction where she said, rather, the same guy who operated at the org. But again, as I just said, that's completely wrong.
Just wrong.
Gosh.
The reason I like this is not just because it is impressive in being wrong in 3 ways, but because it highlights a tendency of hers that I can't stand, which is she'll see a tweet from sort of a left-wing guy. She'll take it like a step up and say something completely unsupported that's only kind of hinted at in the original tweet. We saw, I think it was last week, Mitch McConnell... She accused Mitch McConnell's staffer of running a bot army.
Yeah, Russian bot army.
Yeah, the guy whose tweet
to attack her.
The guy whose tweet she quoted just said, there's an AstroTurf campaign, and he was talking about like a billboard being put up, and so she saw AstroTurf and meant bot army.
She really is Lady Trump. I mean, she is 100% going to be the nominee in 2024. I'm convinced of this. She'll be 35 by then, right?
I guess
maybe
no.
2020.
She's 29.
By then, by then she'll have 16 million followers. And
Another
she'll be
big
able to,
problem here. She spelled "woe" with 2 H's.
Was it W-O-A-H?
W-H-O-A-H.
That's not.
You can't do an H.
Whoa,
you either
whoa.
choose. You do it at the. I do it right after the W.
W-H-O-A
Whoa,
or
wow.
W-O-A.
Or you can end it with H.
Yeah, agreed.
That
Agreed.
is troubling.
4
Very
mistakes.
troubling.
4 mistakes in a tweet. All right. Liz, what was the worst print story this week?
Okay, we're doing a little retro. But since the bombshell college admissions scandal...
It's really too bad we couldn't talk about this since it's not really a media story, but it is one of my favorite stories of the week.
Right. It's pretty hilarious. So you had the 2 actresses involved. They got the headlines for Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin. But Lori Loughlin's daughter... with the one that she paid $500,000 to go to USC to be on the crew team, even though they didn't. Her and the other daughter, they never were on a crew team before. But after, so she went last fall, I assume, and so Teen Vogue. This is the worst print story. They did an interview with her. Her name is Olivia Jade. And how did you decorate your room? And it says Olivia Jade shares her USC dorm decor. But the interview actually just turns into a giant promo ad for Amazon. And so all the questions Teen Vogue ends up asking her are, what was the best part about getting everything on Amazon?
This is bad.
And she's like, oh my gosh, I was also able to use my Prime student membership. Okay. And then Teen Vogue also asked, what's your favorite part about using Prime student? And what would you recommend Prime Student to other students who are still moving in? And of course, Olivia Jade says it's a no-brainer. And it's an entire plug for Amazon. It almost sounds like you need to get paid for promoting Amazon.
I should get paid because I'm always promoting Amazon because it's the best. It's the best.
Because you're owned by Jeff Bezos.
Well, least, I would say. More than
I don't know why she needs to go to college also.
Right. So this is the
she has
thing.
1.3 million
She's
Instagram.
already
She's an influencer.
She's already an Instagram influencer, which is the highest designation you can earn in our society these days.
Yeah.
But so the story is hilarious.
Ideal, right?
The story is hilarious because this girl with 1 million Instagram followers, her mom pays $500,000 to get her into college. And then she uses the Instagram influencers to get Amazon to pay her to promote her fraudulent college experience. And then Teen Vogue writes it up just as a straight thing. It's like, it's the encapsulation of everything that's terrible about modern society in about 800 words of Teen Vogue.
Her best answer, what's your favorite part about using Prime Student? Besides the shipping, it would have to be Prime Video. I can literally shop and watch shows all through Prime.
I hope Teen Vogue got a cut of that Amazon endorsement deal for that.
We should say,
nonsense.
because I'm sure there are people listening at home saying, why are we going after Teen Vogue? Teen Vogue was pushed after the 2016 election as the next big liberal outlet.
Well, yeah,
it was
they started gaslighting, remember?
Yeah, Lauren. This was when Lauren
went
Duca went on Tucker.
Tucker made her.
Tucker made Teen Vogue a
thing,
and now this is why we get to make fun of them. So. Anyway, Andrew, what was the worst thing on TV this week?
Our worst thing on TV this week was from Fox News host Janine Pirro, who got in hot water with her comments about Ilhan Omar's hijab. She said it was incompatible with our Constitution. And we have the clip. We can take a listen quick.
Sure.
Omar wears a hijab, which according to the Quran 33:59 tells women to cover so they won't get molested. Is her adherence to this Islamic doctrine indicative of her adherence to Sharia law, which in itself is antithetical to the United States Constitution? I don't have to tell you, Nancy. Jews have been persecuted almost from the beginning of time.
Yeah, so a lot of outrage about that. Fox News released a statement condemning Pirro's comments. They said, "We strongly condemn Pirro's comments about Omar. They do not reflect those of the network, and we have addressed the matter with her directly."
Yep. It's interesting to note also that Fox did address this and not the Tucker thing because it's something that happened on Fox News.
Yeah. Right, exactly. It's something that is relevant, current in the news, and
something that happened on their network.
It. Yeah.
And one thing, too, to point out that I saw people on Twitter was this was written in her opening statement, like her opening monologue, rather than an off-the-cuff statement. This was pre-planned and went through producers and...
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, look, if you're going to get mad about Omar talking about dual loyalty and when it comes to Jews in Israel, and if you're going to talk about that, you do also have to point out that this is bad. Don't
right.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
It's
why
stupid.
do you have to go there? Yeah. It's like Omar's comments speak for themselves.
There's all sorts of stuff you can attack her on.
Right. It's just so unnecessary.
All right, and of course, we at the Free Beacon aren't perfect. We mess up sometimes. We make mistakes. So the worst of the Beacon this week is, once again, me, Sonny Bunch. My crime, giving Captain Marvel a bad review. After reading my scathing review, Twitter user Monkey Ninja tweeted, quote, "Well, now that I know the movie made this guy's pee-pee feel sad, I think we should go see it at least 3 times," end quote. First off, my pee-pee is always sad.
Where is he wrong? Yeah, where's the lie?
There's no lie.
Where's the lie?
Where's the lie? But second, she wasn't the only one who was angry at me. The right wing was also upset because I had the temerity to point out that Captain Marvel, which grossed $153 million at the domestic box office and $450 million around the world, was a big hit.
Is that a lot?
It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And you know what? They're right. The right, totally right on this. My white knighting
As
for this
usual.
For this anti-man movie is disgusting. I give a tip of the fedora to you all. Okay, that's all we got time for this week. Thanks for listening. Make sure to review us on iTunes. Tell your friends that we exist, or don't. Do either of those things. I'm not the boss of you. See you guys next week.